And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. I am your host, Wes Tankersley. Starting to get back into some of these interviews. If you have been checking out the latest with Robert Watson, myself and I, if you've been watching the latest episodes with Robert Watson and I, this is where we, talk about what's going on, motivational, things like that. And I've been doing that for the last year or so, but now I'm starting to get back into interviews. And one of the first people that I reached out to was my friend Richard Kraft. He is a podcaster. We met on TikTok, and he had me on his show about a year ago. Super exciting to, kind of reciprocate that, have him back on because I love what he's doing. And we're going to talk about that and who he is and get right back to it. So, Richard, what's happening, man?
Hey, how's it going? I'm super excited to be here. I know one of my nurses I used to manage will be super excited to hear this because she definitely brings up your episode as being one of her favorites.
Oh, that's awesome, man. It's kind of a thing of, like we were talking about before we got on here. It's one of those deals where I do this and I get more out of it, I think, than everyone else does. I feel like the conversation and the networking and the energy that comes from this makes me better at what I do,
Agreed. It's always, I think, for me, I'm always kind of like nervous going in, but then when you're done with it and you feel that sense of energy and what you got from the conversation, and whether it's a different perspective or just kind of like a, hey, hang in there, it's going to be okay. I've been through it. Somebody else has been through it. Keep trucking on. This too shall pass. When you get that feeling at the end of it, that's kind of when you know that's what it was supposed to be. And you're very happy that you did it, and you keep going back for more.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of the thing. It's like, why do we do it? We do it because it helps us. It helps other people. And you have an interesting story. Former military, you were in like healthcare for a while. And then, when I talked to you last time, you were doing some Uber driving around and, podcasting, and you were interviewing people like I was on your show. Tell us a little bit about like why you're doing what you're doing, how you got into like healthcare, and then why you transitioned out of that and those types of things.
Wow. So, initially, I think I got into healthcare. I was in the military because I have a heart of service, and that kind of goes to as well with the healthcare thing. And I always say that, I worked in healthcare a couple of times. In my mid-20s, I remember getting real sick, and I came in, and I started working in healthcare in the emergency room, and I decided I wanted to go to school and be something having to do in the medical field. And I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And then I took healthcare law, and between that and people who were writing me recommendations for grad school, it was like, you probably won't be able to be the kind of doctor you want to be because it's very business driven, and you are about the person, and you need time to spend with people. And the realities are, when I was managing healthcare, we allow doctors about 15 to 20 minutes per patient slot. So that's the reality. But, fast forward, I worked in healthcare, graduated college, ended up being a personal trainer. I had lost about 40 pounds, and I still had that wanting to help people, but I wasn't necessarily, I didn't want to be a doctor, so I was training people, and then kind of didn't like that either because, again, corporate fitness is similar to corporate healthcare in that, I was a trainer, and I'm like, I spend more time doing sales than I do training, and we have a sales team. This is messed up. So, disenfranchised with that, I fell back onto cooking, and my wife and I moved to Austin, where we spent 9 years, and somewhere in there I'd worked at a mixed martial arts training facility because I have a black belt and took martial arts as a child, and then worked seasonal with the IRS. And while I was working that, I got a job for healthcare, and I ended up working 6 years in a level 1 trauma center. And I had applied for one job and they pushed me to a different department, and I'm thankful they did. It was a huge blessing and probably contributed to me staying. And, level 1 trauma, a lot like the military, it just fits my personality. And working in kitchens, it's very brash. It's very like about your job, about meritocracy. The please and thank yous are kind of at the end. It's like, yes, please do your job, but there's lives on the line here. So, I shouldn't have to ask you, please, just do your job. And so that fit me very well. It's a lot of my personality type. And you see a lot, I've seen a lot of death. My first shift was taking a body to the morgue as soon as I walked in that first day. So, and then about 6 years in, I was kind of wanting to advance. I was in this position. There was no vertical or lateral movement. And my wife's like, well, why don't you go to graduate school? And I was like, because I really don't want to go back to school. But I applied and ended up getting into graduate school. And while I was going to graduate school, it was kind of this hybrid program where you go for a week of in-person classes with your cohort. It's called an intense week. And there's even one 12-hour day in it. And of classes. And so you do that, and then you go back and you do the rest kind of online, and you're assigned groups, and that's why you meet your cohort and work with them in person. And while I was doing that, we had a new baby, and we're like, hey, let's move towards one of our family's houses, and so we can have help with that. And near my home is kind of what came calling. So we moved up here, and I finished out grad school and learned it, went from being a doer follower to a leader and manager. And that was a difficult transition, of course. And, but it was there. It took a lot of time to develop some leadership skills and whatnot. And I spent 6 years doing that and started off with one clinic. And by the end, I had 2 clinics, 2 ambulatory facilities with multiple primary care, urgent care, sleep medicine, ortho. One of them had a gym. So these are big facilities. And along comes the pandemic, and, everybody starts downsizing. And it was strictly a business decision. I got laid off. I'm the one, out of my group of directors and managers, I'm the one with the master's degree. I'm probably the most expensive. So, yeah. And it was soul crushing because that was the first time in 45 years I'd ever been laid off, let go, fired, whatever you want to call it, from a job. And even though I knew it was business, it was very heartbreaking because, I had spent a life of service, be that in the military, working in kitchens, waiting tables, working in healthcare. And I've always felt like people who are service-oriented folks, like people who are missionaries and stuff, I don't think it's what we do. I think it's who we are.
Right.
And so you could imagine that just crushed me. But it was during this time of, while I was Ubering post layoff, I had a lot of time to listen to podcasts and think and kind of reconcile this. And, I had to understand that what made me a person of service was the qualities of it. When people say describe yourself, I would say kind, caring, and compassionate. Mm-hmm. So I come to understand that, well, that's who I am, not the healthcare person, not that. That was just the vehicle through which I delivered my service. And, even when I would Uber, I would have these things where you're delivering 255-pound bags of dog food, let's say, to a house, and you pull in and they have a handicap converted van and stuff like that. And you're like, these are probably people I would help for free, but I'm getting paid to do it. So I'm still doing a service. I'm making people's life easier. And once I come to understand that, and then once I come to understand, like, almost like forgiving a partner who's unfaithful, forgiving the company for their business decision, and that, well, what did I get from it? Man, I learned how to run 2 multi-million-dollar clinics. I learned so much leadership stuff. I interviewed a ton of people for jobs, which helped me to gain a skill for interviewing for podcasting.
Yep.
And so once I learned, and I was like, I forgive you. Thank you for all that you gave me. And I started to realize all that. I was like, that kind of really helped me to get over it. And then when I was considering going back in, I had applied to some jobs, had some job offers, and declined them because I didn't want to relocate my family. And I was actually reapplying back to the organization that laid me off. And my daughter's like, well, do you want 2 and 3 a.m. phone calls anymore? Why don't you start a podcast? And so that's kind of what I did. I was like, well, other than listening to them, I don't know what I know about them other than I enjoy them.
Right.
But this idea of, hey, I'm kind, caring, and compassionate. I dealt with the layoff poorly by boozing and stuff. And, 2 years ago, I sobered up, kind of went on this fitness and sober-ish journey type of thing because it was bad for me. And I realized that, perspective was a big thing, and understanding once I forgave them, shifting that perspective and how it made me feel and how things opened up. I was like, man, if I can have these conversations with other people, and if people can get a perspective shift and look at something a little bit different, it might be just the biggest blessing in disguise.
Right.
Because, deciding to start a podcast and doing odd jobs and this and that, the other, it really gave me the time to be the person I always wanted to be, but I kind of had it backwards, I thought like, oh, I would be a manager, make director, and then be a VP as my daughter's growing up. And when she turns 18 and goes to college, I can be one of those VPs that, a lot of them fly in on Sunday or Monday, work till Thursday, and then fly back to where they're really from or where they're really living. And I was like, I could be there for my daughter wherever she needs me to be. I'll be flexible. And when I got laid off, you're like, oh, yeah. It's like you have to enjoy now because the future may never come, or it may look different, as displayed by the pandemic. And so I was like, the time to be the father and husband and all that is now. And if I can do that via odd jobs, not clocking in, not reporting to someone and not having them control my time and everything else, the reality is when she turns 18 and starts her own life and goes to college, if I want a full-time job, I can get one then.
Yep.
But it's like she's 11 and I've been doing this for the past 5 years. So since she was 6.
Mm-hmm.
So, I get to spend I've gotten to spend all these years. I've gotten to say yes to all the field days. When she's sick, I can stay home. My wife and I aren't competing of who's going to call in, who's got PTO, who's got write-ups, who might get fired because our daughter's sick. And so
it's funny hearing that because that's the way my life is. My wife is the same way. She's a nurse, right? And so my son yesterday and the day before had a fever, and it's like he can't go to daycare unless his fever's gone, and you have to negotiate that. It's like I have a little bit more ability to kind of be flexible, but at the same token, it's a new business that I'm starting, so it does make it tough. And like that's the question. It's like, when did you call in last? How many days do you have until this clears out so you can call in again? And are you going to get fired or are you going to get written up? And is it worth it? What do we do?
It's a whole thing, man. It's, when you realize that outside pressure actually exists and what it does. I mean, as a leader, which my team nominated me as a tier 1 leader, and that's my most proudest accomplishment, which means they think that I gave a shit, and I did, and it came through, and that's why I'm proud of that. There's no phony behind it. But I would always tell them, like, take care of yourself. And whatever you need to take care of. That way when you come back, you can be here, present, because if you got a person who's distracted, or you got a lazy person, it doesn't matter. Either way, somebody else is picking up the slack, another part of the team. That's why it matters having good teammates and hiring good people, because, if you hire a bad person, they're taking up space and the core team member's still doing the same amount of work, which is what the extra person is supposed to avoid. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and it's been tough. It's been, like I was telling you earlier, taking odd jobs, like whether it's studies, and I do Uber, and I do some caregiving here and there. And, I did a job as a live-in caregiver for a 97-year-old veteran for 3.5 months. It was a family ordeal until he passed. And so, these opportunities come along, and it's really about, for me, it's been crucial to kind of keep that faith and stand strong, and that opportunities will come when they need to, and just take advantage of them. But anything that kind of keeps me from, I feel like, putting myself back in the situation that I got out of, because I realized, for me, and this is just me personally, everybody shouldn't be entrepreneurs or whatever,
Right.
but that outside control from other people really manifested itself, I think, in physical ways, in poor health. I mean, I'm not a good drinker, and it caused me to drink poorly. I wasn't a good drinker anyway, but then that kind of exacerbated it. It's not saying one is the other, but, there is this thing when you have some days and you're just like, man, I just need a drink. And then it was like, I'd have a couple of drinks, eat some food, and then pass out. And it's like, well, yeah, I'm 155 pounds today. I was 213 pounds. It's like, what the fuck, dude? It's like, yeah. When you do that day after day because you don't deal with things in the correct way, because it's a stressful job. It's, being a manager kind of in a healthcare system. Well, I'll say any frontline manager, really. It's kind of like being stuck in between mom and dad. Is you're trying to take care of your team because they're your people. They're the people you do everything for. It's like your children.
Right.
And then your directors and VPs are trying to tell you what they need and want from you. And you're trying to break it softly to them, or try not to break them, or try to push them in the correct way. And, kind of being pulled in each direction, kind of a loyalty towards the system idea and who you are as a leader, and the loyalty to your team, the people on the ground actually making it happen. That can cause a lot of internal strife, I think. But it only causes strife if you care. People who don't give a shit, they don't suffer from this kind of stuff. If I were like they say nice guys finish last, and man, if I could just be a dick and not care about people's feelings and only care about my own advancement and stepping on people and breaking eggs to make omelets, those people have no problems in those positions because they're ready to get to the next level, and they're willing to put their team through anything to get there.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking because people like you and I feel the same way. Like, the reason why I do this is, like I told you, my own selfish reasons, where like this conversation is very helpful to me. But it's also to show other people that anything is possible. Someone may be in that same scenario that you've been in, and you've thought about it, and you're like, I got torn away from this. Like, I lost my job through COVID. I have a couple options, right? Like, I can sit here and they all move forward, or you just stop. You let it stop you. And I think that the biggest thing is, you have to show people that you're capable of moving forward, and how can you do it, and what does it take to make that happen. And if you just sat there and just stewed in it forever, and you could have let the alcohol, ruin that for you. You could have just sat there and just drank your life away. Or you could say, look, I recognize that this is an issue. I learned a lot here, and it's not bad. It's just not everything that I wanted. And now I've learned that this is not what I need. I need something different to feed me, to fuel me, to make me better. And I think that that's a great thing about it. When you first asked me to be on your podcast, we were talking a lot about like, well, what are you doing here? What are you doing there? I've done it for a while. I'm no expert, but I've done it long enough to know that this worked for me, and these can work. And to me, it's like, you and I are in the same space, and no matter what it is, I want you to be better. You want me to be better. And we're not sitting here going, I'm not going to trade my secrets with you, because if I trade my secrets with you, then you're going to be better than me. And I really don't care about that. What I care about is that everyone is able to continue to move forward. And so I think once you recognize that, that is the most helpful thing in life, because just like you said in the beginning, you've spent your life in service. And that's really where I'm at. Like, I was a teacher. I have a master's degree. And I thought that that was an awesome way to get to go ahead and help other people do things. But I realized real fast that that wasn't going to work for me, because the parents and kids and all these things that are way different than when I first wanted to be a teacher, I can't make that push on them and help them and get them to go in the right direction, because it's just, there's too many things causing it to be in chaos.
Systematic
Yeah.
failure is we have systematic failure on so many levels in the country and the world. And I don't think it's like I don't want to say it's intentional, but think about this of the world. Like, our world really isn't that old. I mean, the guy I was a caregiver for was born in 1927. His parents lived through the Great Depression. You know, that was one of my last collegiate courses, was reading about that and seeing the parallels in like the 2005, 2008-ish time range. But being that the world isn't that old, it's like, if you understand, like as a manager or leader, if you understand breaking down information into small digestible information, somebody gives you a project, it's got 20 moving pieces. You need to break them down into categories, smaller pieces, so you can get started.
Right.
So in a big ass world like we live in, yes, they have to categorize, make systems, put people in categories to make the system work. And it's a good idea. It's for a reason. But then somewhere systems get out of control, the people in them who are self-serving, and, you know, whether this is the education system, political systems, healthcare systems, all the way down to a family-run business, their little hierarchical management structure can be warped and messed up too.
Mm-hmm.
And
Trust
you know,
me, I've been there.
It's not, yeah. So it's not to anybody's fault, but you just have to understand that, you know, maybe is it the system that's the problem? Is it the design of the system, the organization, or the leadership in it? You know, sometimes systems still make the best sense in the way of organization of big things into small digestible things. But if you look at many things, it really boils down to the leadership within it, within any system, because the leadership and culture, because that determines what the organization or system stands for and what it's going to invest its time in, and produce. And so I think that, you know, in a world leadership is one of the biggest things right now. I think that we need to see around, and I've been having this conversation and this thought process of, you know, what really makes it so difficult these days is we have all this information available, because of the internet and AI and all that. But, you know, the amount of people with the experience and or knowledge to comprehend or parse out how to make the information usable and valuable is more limited.
Right.
And, you know, and so experience does account for things nowadays. And it's hard when you live in a world where people have a false sense of experience just because they have the information at their fingertips.
Yep.
You know, we don't all have the same IQ or experience, but we all have access to the same information, and that's scary.
Yeah, and it's insane because the interpretation of that, right? Like I think of it like when someone sits there and talks about like what you find attractive, right? So we're looking at, you know, you're attracted to a female, you're attracted to blonde hair, you're attracted to, you know, shiny teeth,
big
white
booties.
teeth. Yeah, exactly. Like, but that's the difference between you and me is you may have a different idea of what's attractive than I do, or what's ugly, or what's a problem. And it's, to me, it's like once you can get past that and just understand that everyone is different. I mean, training, for example, you were a trainer, right? So what you tell me to do may work for me, or it may not. So there's no cookie cutter approach to whatever it is. And I think that that's the biggest problem is that like parents, as a parent, I sit there and I think about it, it's like, well, what's going on with my daughter at school? Why is this problem happening? I interpret it this way but then in my mind, because I was a teacher and I know how things go, I don't necessarily always believe what she's saying to me because there's a possibility that she misinterpreted it or that it was taken care of, but she didn't like the way that it was taken care of. So she's telling me the information that she wants me to know, not all the information. And that's where we have to figure that out is like, how do we parse out the correct information and make sure that it works for us personally, not for everyone?
How do you have those, that's interesting that you mentioned that, that example, especially being a teacher. How do you address your daughter in a situation like that where where you're trying, because I always say we're trying to raise good little human beings, because
Mm-hmm.
we refer to them as kids and stuff, but they're little humans. They're going to grow up to be like us,
Right.
So how do you address that kind of thing in trying to explain to her the concept of, don't tell me the thing you just want me to hear, tell me the whole truth?
It's hard, man. It really is, because again, like I said, like I have, as a teacher, like you're sitting there and a parent calls in and they say, well, you're giving my kid an F. And I'm like sitting there going, no, I'm not giving your kid an F. Your kid is earning the F.
Earned an F.
Yeah. They're not doing the work. They're not dressing down. Because as a PE teacher, it's like, they're not dressing down. They're not, if I give them an assignment, they're not handing in their assignment. They're not participating in class. They have the rules. They refuse to follow them. And so then the parent, they go and they talk to the kid, and the kid tells them a different story. Well, he's just being mean to me. He doesn't like me. There's this, there's that. And that's what I hear. And so like, it's hard, because I want to believe her in what she's saying. And I believe that there is truth in it, but I also believe that it's somewhere in between what she's telling me and what is actually happening, because we interpret things differently. And it's hard for me, because I don't want to say I'm a perfectionist, but I'm very structured in the way that I do things. And when I see what she does here in front of me, and I'm very structured in the way that I do things, so like loading the dishwasher. Hey, you need to load the dishwasher. I go over there and she's got the bowls sitting face up. So, everyone knows when you put those in there that way, the dishwasher runs, it fills up with water, and it's going to have dirty water in it by the end of the cycle. So like when I see her telling me one thing, but I see her doing this other thing, I'm like, well, your teacher's mad because this kid was calling you this or that, but you were sitting there drawing when he was giving you the math lesson. Like, what's really going on? How do you know what the truth is? And so for me, it's very difficult, because my structured personality is different than my daughter's, and I'm learning to deal with that. And I think that we all have to learn to deal with that, because every single person and kid is different. And so, like me as a football player, and I think we might have talked about this in your podcast, but like when my coach yelled at me, I was motivated not to get yelled at again. So what did I do? I changed the way that I did it, and I got the outcome that he desired to make myself better, right?
Yeah.
And so I try to do the same thing with my daughter, but then realize pretty quickly that doesn't motivate her to do anymore. It just kind of makes her look at me differently and be mad at me. So I can't do that with her. And it's a crapshoot with life in general. It's like, as a manager, it's the same thing. It's like we're basically managing these little humans, like you said.
Yeah.
How do you motivate that one? And my son is completely different than my daughter. My daughter doesn't want to get a spanking when she's little. She doesn't want to cuss. She doesn't want to swear. She doesn't want to do the repeat things because she knows that it's naughty. And then my son is like looking at me in the eyes, and I swat him on the behind, and then he turns around and swings at me. It's like,
yeah, I do.
It's crazy.
It's funny because I always, the funny thing is, one of the things I hear about all the time, and I think when you go into something like we have entrepreneurship and podcasting, which is a form of entrepreneurship in its own right.
Right.
But I always think of this thing, you're a culmination of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I'm like, man, as dads, you're just like screwed because it's like your kids. I mean, you do have your work people unless you're doing kind of this independent thing. But, when you think about like your kids, your wife, you're like, oh man, like, and I'm the leader here, and I'm the one that's pulled together sometimes.
Right.
But I get what they're saying, but the truth of the matter is you kind of are at the center of your nucleus and of the core of your family as a leader. You should be as a man, husband.
Right.
And, so for me, I think one of the biggest things in this journey of starting the podcast, becoming an entrepreneur, one of the things that's really kept me going is what am I showing my daughter? She was the one that I suggest I start a podcast. And so that really gave me that one thing to focus on and give me direction, something to work on. And then a lot of other things on the work front started falling into place. I was already Ubering, but then other things kind of came because I feel like I I had this drive and determination to kind of focus on that. But, I mean, it's just been, I think what's kept me going is what am I showing her if I quit? She suggested I do it. And there's been a lot of times where it's like, man, like maybe you're waiting to find guests, or I don't know. There's just so many challenges from downloads to everything. But I always go, what am I showing her if I stop? Two, what I get something from these. I get the conversation. And if I get something from it, then I know if one person out there needs to hear it that day and they can get something from it, then it's worth it. Because we all have this idea of like, we look at somebody like Joe Rogan or somebody who's the top and you're like, oh, talking and man, how hard could it be? Yada, yada, yada. But the truth is it's very competitive. It's very difficult. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of reps. And not everybody makes it. So you have to decide, do you want to? Are you the person you really say you are? Are you about service? Are you going to do this whether it makes $100 million or $5 or $0?
Right.
And so it's really been helpful in, I think, keeping me grounded and pushed me and helped me grow in a lot of different ways in areas that I didn't even know. And, when Buck passed away, I was doing a bunch of solo episodes. I had stopped interviewing while I was taking care of him just due to logistics. And then when he passed, I kind of took a little break and I felt empty-ish. It was a way for me to reconcile, download, get some things off my chest. And I know if somebody else hears it and like, oh, because I mean, that's what it's all about is like, hey, I feel that too. I'm not alone. Somebody else. Maybe we can get together and brainstorm how to get out of this. Or what did he do? Or maybe I have something he can do. And, it really kind of goes back to all that in the world of, hey, we're trying only what we say, but what we show them, because we know kids don't always listen, but they'll imitate.
Yeah.
But then we'll have these conversations here when our children become adults and they can go back and hear this and understand what we were coming from. Because, there are things that either my daughter says, does, that let me know that she gets it and she's understanding some of the actions and things that I do and even some of the things I say. But I'm not counting on my kids to hear everything I say. But hence the importance, the other part of having a podcast and recording that is working 6 years in a trauma center, you know that life is fragile. And should something happen to me unexpectedly, I have a record of who I was, how I felt, what I thought, the amount of love I had for the people in my life. And they'll always be able to come back and hear this. And so anytime I was ever nervous about hitting publish, I just got over my ego and said, if I could go back and hear conversations of, like, let's say my great grandparents, somebody I never met, somebody I never heard, but they're my family, I would absolutely love to know what they were like. We just didn't have that technology available. And the fact that we do, I feel like I'd just be doing a disservice not to offer that up to the people in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's great. It's a great recollection of who you are. I mean, I look at it every single day. Like I wrote down 425 for the episode today that like things go wrong, right? Like I told you that we're sitting here listening. There's this echo on this one. And it's like, what do I do? Now I can't do anything with it. I listened to it. Sounds like crap. We had the conversation. It was a conversation between us. Hopefully I can fix it. But the reality is that there's a bunch of other things of me talking to people like you, putting it out there. I haven't taken down. I mean, there's things that I've learned from my episodes too. I mean, I've interviewed a few people that like after it's all said and done, like one of my most listened to episodes, watched or whatever, the guy's not a very good person. And I found that out, this year and later on. And it's like, do I take it down? Maybe I need to go and take and address that episode. But then on the same token, it's like, I don't know. I mean, like I learned some stuff from that guy. I learned some things to do. I learned what not to do. Just like you're talking about, you lose your job, you learn what not to do. So if people can just look and listen and think about the lessons that they learned about what they want to do and what not to do. It's like my business that I've started is similar to the business that I was in before. It's the exact same thing, but I know exactly what I don't want to do in my business that my previous employer was doing in his business. So
Yeah, there's a reason.
right. So how can you take that and how can you move forward? And that's really what it's about. And I think it's awesome to listen to you talk about that. And it's a self-reflection. I went through that same thing where there was a time where I was just doing solos and that's all I was doing because I want people to know who I am too. It's great to interview someone and you can inject a little bit of who you are, but they still don't quite really get a whole lot of it from you. So it's made me better at the interview process because now I'm talking about who I am. I'm talking about what I believe in, side by side, parallel to what you're talking about. So it's a great way to just get out there and talk more,
I think it's both. Like I always tell people, because there's so much content out there and a lot of it's good. And so for me, it's about the host. And so what I love is like, yes, I love interviews, but I love catching a host of a show I love on another podcast and learning about them.
Right.
Because it's really my connection to the host that keeps me going back to the podcast.
Right.
Because, chances are people who make circuits of comedians, musicians, whatever, when they do runs like that, you're going to hear them on 4 or 5 different podcasts. But I'm going to listen to them on the one that I feel the most connection with the host.
Right.
Because it's like, again, it's one of those things of figuring out. I think of it in this terms of when you think about movie stars and whatnot, and, a lot is shrunken with social media. But even back in the day in the 40s and 50s, what made that allure was like we didn't know about them and we wanted to know about the movie star. How are they like us? How are they different from us?
Right.
Because once you grow up and you understand like these are people just like you and me, but their job is to read lines and memorize stuff and whatnot. And, but it takes some of the mysticalness out of it. But it's the same way like being a podcast or anything else. It's like taking some of that out there going like, man, this is a regular dude who can do that. Or I thought about doing that. It's like you stepping out and starting Shade Bros. It's like, what gave you that, like I just got to get out and do something different,
Right.
And there's other people who have that. And there's some reason we all have, and there's somebody that's listening who wants to take that chance and they want to know, man, he's just like me and this worked for him, or I see that he's now happy because he did it. Yes, it was challenging, but he's now happy and I'm similar. So maybe I should do that. And I think that's that importance of relating in people's stories and host stories, no matter what they are, because I think they're relative to kind of all subjects. It's like maybe your entrepreneur journey is Shade Bros because that's what you did. Mine is something different, but the lessons within there, they're very similar.
That's
it's just
that's
a matter of what it is.
Like it's giving the blueprint of what you did to get where you're at, and that's why when I started it, that's what it was all about, and that's what it's shifting back to. It's kind of funny because it's kind of coming full circle because in the beginning, I wanted to interview local people who are here in the Treasure Valley and talk to them about how they created their success and what their business was and what that is and how you got there, because I'm willing to help anyone who wants to start a shade company. I'm willing to help anyone who wants to become a teacher. I'm willing to help anyone who wants to be a podcast. Any knowledge that I have, I want to help them get there. But I also want them to have that blueprint, which it could be that, someone wants to be a podcaster like you, or someone wants to get into healthcare like you were. And those are the things. It's like, what does it take? Some people don't know where to start. Some people are scared to start. Some people feel a certain way about something and they just don't know how to get through it. But your story may help them. And so,
well, and there's sides of everything that, a lot of people only advertise the good sides of it.
Right.
A lot of people don't advertise this. Like, yes, I mean, well, of course, too, even podcasting, when you go into it, you think of being a podcaster. Oh man, I can sit and talk, and you see a clip or something and you're like, people laughing and having the conversation. Well, that's the smallest part of the damn being a podcaster is research, editing, posting, this, that, the other, how to get SEO. It's like, if you're not willing to enjoy the process of that, and like healthcare, I mean, yes, when somebody came in and they're going to die and they walk out and their family tells you, thank you for saving my life or my parents' life. Yes, it's good, but I can tell you there are some moments in there and some things you have to do that if you can't take that part in the journey, and I think this, like what these podcasts, these episodes, this is where the nuggets of the real truth lie. It's not about the good parts.
Right.
It's about us expressing those little bad parts and the parts that you really, when you question yourself, like, man, I don't really know if I want to do this. But ultimately you determine that the outcome of what you're trying to do is more beneficial, and I can take that. It's like me going, you know what? Like for me to tell something super embarrassing on a My Journey episode or something
Right.
I did that I'm not super proud of or ashamed of. It's like, but if somebody can get that and they don't have to have suicide ideations, or they don't have to think they're going to hell and turn to alcohol and run off a cliff, set themselves on fire,
Right.
if they can keep themselves from doing that just because they understand that's not the way, then you know what? Forget my ego. It's not that big of a deal, and because when in the end, I think about that, and I don't know if it's because I've seen a lot of death and whatnot, but it's like when I said I identify as being kind, caring, and compassionate, I think about that because I've had that moment of like, well, what would you want people to say about you at your funeral?
Right.
I'd want people to say he was kind, caring, and compassionate, and all he did as a person, he was, he listened, he understood, he thought that this stuff was more important than that, My favorite stuff about my job as a healthcare leader, it wasn't anything about the healthcare. It was the small conversations, the hour rounding I got to spend in my office talking to you about everything outside of this facility. That's where the magic happens, that relationship. And I believe that's why I was a tier 1 leader, because I think that everything is about relationships, how you treat others. And I don't know. I just think that that's kind of the key.
Yeah. And it's a lot of, the perception versus reality is a big thing too, that you were talking about. Like people see you, they see the 3 clips that you made, but they didn't see what it took to make that. They didn't see in the background all the things you were doing. And that's it, man. It's like, it's a great way to look at that. Just understand that no matter what you're doing, you see the good parts of what's going on. And you look at like, I don't know, like Grant Cardone, I saw a clip of him this morning. You look at him, for instance, like, I'm a billionaire, this is going on, blah, 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 blah. But you don't know what it took to get there. Like, you don't know the work that he had to
Imagine
do
how
to get
many
there.
lawsuits and stuff those people have to go through. And it's like, I look at that kind of stuff, and there's so many people who are like, I mean, us as entrepreneurial spirits, we're like, you want all that and you want to be successful, but at some point in time, a legal matter, something like that's going to happen, an unhappy person, a bad review.
Yep.
And those hurt us kind of people because we're people of integrity. And sometimes you feel like somebody saying you didn't do a good job is a attack on your character, because people like you and I, we don't set out trying to do a bad job or mess up. If it happens, it was really accidental and not intentional.
Right.
But entering into these kind of spaces, be it a podcast, something you say, whatever, there are going to be hurt people out there who are going to make mean, nasty comments and say stupid stuff. And, but you have to understand that, hey, what I'm out there trying to do, even when you worked and weren't an entrepreneur and worked at somebody else, somebody still has that ability to make a bad review, say something negative about you. But at least now you have the full control and ownership of what you're putting out.
Right.
And it has nothing to do with because your hands were tied by a manager you worked for, a company you worked for. And that's kind of what I've learned in getting laid off and having to work for other people half of my life and wanting to spend this half doing entrepreneurial stuff is I trust me. I trust my intentions. I entrust why I'm doing something. And I'm going to go with that as opposed to when you work for other people and they ask you to do things and they make decisions and you don't know if they're making them based off of integrity, good moral character, or strictly a capitalistic monetary type decision, which business people, big business, when it's billions, it's usually that.
Yep.
So yeah, you just need to understand that, that's that's the price you kind of pay for control is you're going to take the good with the bad, but you get the same stuff even if you work for some complain as a manager.
Yep. It doesn't matter one way or another. People are going to say something that you don't like. And as long as you stick to your ability, your guns and walk that path that you want to walk, you're not worrying about what other people think. Doesn't mean that it doesn't bother you. It just means that you find a way to compartmentalize it a little bit differently. So
go and understand that, you know what? Nobody cares about other people or nobody cares about themselves more than themselves.
Right.
So even if they throw a negative comment out there, whatever, I can assure you people are so selfish that a majority of their time is spent thinking about them, how they can get ahead and their stuff and how they don't want to be shat on, even though they're out there shitting on other people.
Yep.
But, I think when you understand that and you understand that some people are just, they're hurt people.
Yep.
And you got to keep pressing on because, anytime you get like a good comment or it's just like that one little thing of somebody saying thank you or they heard an episode or they loved a guest or somebody said something, it makes it all worth it.
Yep. Well, Richard, it's been awesome having you on here. I appreciate you coming back on coming on here, after I was on your podcast and sharing your thoughts. You're doing a few I think you're doing some coaching now too, and a couple other things. So kind of tell people a little bit about where they can find you and what you're doing.
Absolutely. So I have a link tree and it has anywhere and everywhere you can get the podcast, but it is the Men of the House podcast, and that is on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, YouTube, pretty much all your platforms. I am most active on Instagram and Facebook if you want to get in touch with me. I have a private accountability group in Facebook and WhatsApp. I am in there daily. It does not matter what you want to be accountable for, but it is a place where I post, you can watch, you can participate as much or as little as you like. But essentially, I hit 2 years of no alcohol yesterday, and I want to be that person for you, no matter what you need accountability for. So I do that, and yeah, so mostly podcasting and private accountability group. And let's see. Yeah, that's really it.
Well, awesome job. Thank you very much. We'll be posting clips about this. You can go check them out, like Richard said, at the Men of the House podcast. Really good one. Wes Tankersley approved, if that means anything to you. Go check it out. If you guys are interested in checking me out or follow me at wes.tankersley, anywhere you find podcasts, you can listen to it, watch the show. This is streaming on all platforms right now. And if you're looking for window coverings in the Treasure Valley, hit us up, 208-99-SHADE, and we'll help you get those windows covered. And until next time, I challenge you to find the shape of your success.
Awesome.